Fault lines in Port Charles. When a secret becomes a weapon, Port Charles is brimming with the kind of tension you can feel in the bones before anyone raises a voice. It starts as a murmur, whispers about a young woman's new allegiance and a mother who isn't in the loop, then sharpens into the click of a drawn line. Who knows what, and who gets to claim Jason Morgan's loyalty when the truth cuts two ways. The catalyst is not a mob war or a courthouse verdict, but something more intimate and far more combustible. The realization that Jocelyn Jacks has stepped into the shadow world of the WSB, and not everyone who believes they're owed the truth has actually received it. In that space between knowledge and omission, Britt Westbourne finds her leverage, and Carly Spencer finds her most dangerous blind spot. Britt's calculation. Second place is not a life. Britt has never been shy about her appetites, for challenge, for recognition, for a version of love that doesn't ask her to stand behind anyone. If she has learned anything from the rough education of Port Charles, it's that proximity to Jason does not equal priority. She has chemistry with him, undeniable, electric, and stubborn. She has history with him, complicated, laced with adrenaline, and littered with unfinished sentences. But she also has a ledger. Moments when Jason showed up, and moments when he turned, reflexively, toward Carly and Carly's children because that is what Jason does. For Britt, there's no malice in the arithmetic, there's just math. If you keep coming in second, eventually you stop pretending you can live with it. That doesn't mean she's cruel. Britt is not interested in pain for pain's sake. But she is a woman who recognizes an opening when it appears, and the town has placed one in her hands. A secret of outsized weight, Jocelyn's quiet recruitment into the WSB, that she did not solicit, did not leak, yet now carries like a loaded page in her pocket. She knows Jason knows. She knows Carly does not. She knows what that asymmetry can do to people who insist there are no asymmetries in their bond. Carly's blind spot. Gratitude is not permission. Carly's identity as a protector is so ingrained it might as well be genetic. She assesses risk the way others measure the weather, and when danger changes shape, she is the first to redraw the map. Her gratitude to Britt for saving Jocelyn from Heather Weber was real, raw, and immediate. For a time, that gratitude was a truce line. Carly could not ignore that Britt stood between her daughter and devastation. But gratitude is not the same as trust, and it's certainly not the same as permission. The minute Britt steps from lifesaver to romantic contender, someone Jason might choose not just for a night but for the fragile possibility of peace, Carly's instincts reassert themselves. Not because she is small, but because she believes she sees farther. In her calculus, Jason's heart is safest in the custody of someone who understands him the way she does. Anyone else is a variable, and variables are where disasters hide. So when Carly senses the familiar static of jealousy buzzing under her skin, she doesn't call it jealousy. She calls it caution. She calls it concern. She calls it protecting Jason from yet another heartbreak that will ripple outward to the people she loves. She tells herself she is defending the center. What she cannot admit is that the center and Jason are not synonyms, and that Jocelyn's choices have begun to orbit something that isn't Carly's gravity anymore. Jason's compartment: love, loyalty, and the cost of silence. If Jason has a superpower, it's compartmentalization. He locks the dangerous thing in one room, the sacred thing in another, and the everyday thing in a third. This is how he protects people, by ensuring that the door between rooms is thick and hard to breach. Jocelyn's WSB status belongs to the room labeled Need to Know. The rule is brutal but simple: the fewer people who can be compromised, the fewer people who can be hurt. He tells himself he's keeping secrets to save people from consequences they did not choose. That is not the same as believing Carly isn't entitled to know, it's believing that the risk of her knowing outweighs the comfort of her certainty. It's also believing that Carly, for all her fearlessness, doesn't get to make Jocelyn's decisions for her. The problem is not the room. The problem is what happens when someone rattles the doorknob. Britt, with her particular combination of unsentimental clarity and bruised longing, rattles it with purpose. Jason still feels the spark with her, an inconvenient and undeniable flame that refuses to die, and the more he tries to shove that truth into the room marked later, the more oxygen it finds in the hallway. He has a chance at something softer with Britt, something real and earned. But he also knows that every step he takes toward that possibility is a step away from the old pattern in which Carly's need is always the loudest sound in the room. The push that becomes a shove. It rarely takes a spectacular betrayal to detonate a long-fused bomb. More often, it's a final straw disguised as a small offense, a throwaway remark, an accusatory glance, a reminder that in Carly's mind Britt will always be provisional, useful in a crisis but unacceptable as a constant. The temperature rises. Words sharpen. Old rescues get tallied as though gratitude were a mortgage Britt still owes. At some point, the argument stops being about romance and becomes a referendum on credibility. Who gets to claim the moral right to Jason's silence? Britt is a surgeon by training, she prefers scalpel to sledgehammer. Yet even a surgeon knows that sometimes the only way to stop the bleeding is to expose the wound. She doesn't plan to say it, not exactly. But when Carly suggests that Jason's heart will always default to her, Britt hears a verdict masquerading as fact. And when Carly implies that if there were something important to know, she would know it, Britt hears the one assertion she cannot abide: that her reality is less real because Carly refuses to recognize it. So Britt reaches for the page in her pocket. She doesn't wave it like a flag. She simply holds it up to the light and lets its silhouette speak. Jocelyn. The WSB. The choice made in quiet. The circle of knowledge that did not include Carly. It lands with the dull weight of truth, not a rumor, not a threat, an inarguable fact that reorders the room. In that instant, the argument stops being abstract. Carly's face tells the story in slow motion: certainty, then confusion, then the kind of hurt that immediately reconstitutes itself into anger because anger is sturdier armor. The anatomy of a fallout. What makes this moment devastating isn't only the content of the secret, but its symbolic geometry. For years, the mythology of Jason and Carly has been built on the premise that nothing important lives outside their shared line of sight. Britt's revelation breaks that mythology with one clean fracture. There are rooms even Carly can't enter, and there are decisions Jason supports that don't wait for her permission. It is an affront to Carly's worldview, an insult to the chain of command she thought she understood. And because Jocelyn is at the heart of it, the affront is maternal, not merely romantic. If Carly was ready to distrust Britt as a rival, she is now ready to condemn her as a reckless interloper who weaponized Jocelyn's security for the sake of winning an argument. Britt, for her part, will not accept the accusation. She did not recruit Jocelyn. She did not hide the information out of spite. She is not the architect of Carly's humiliation. She is the messenger who dared to speak when everyone else hid behind chivalry and euphemism. If the men in Carly's life, the recruiter who said nothing, the confidant who said nothing, presumed that silence was a kindness, Britt sees it as condescension. She names it and refuses to apologize for naming it. In a town that runs on secrets, she demands that the consequences be shared by the people who insist on control. Jocelyn's autonomy, Brennan's shadow, and the question of consent. Strip away the triangle and you arrive at the real heat source: Jocelyn's agency. Joining the WSB is not an accessory to someone else's plot. It is a declaration about the kind of life she intends to lead and the risks she is willing to own. Jack Brennan's recruitment sits in the background like a dimly lit doorway, mysterious enough to breed suspicion, concrete enough to matter. Whether you view him as strategist or manipulator, he is the one who placed Jocelyn at the table. He did not ask Carly's permission. He did not solicit Jason's blessing. He operated within a world where consent belongs to the person taking the oath, not the community trying to protect her from its weight. That distinction will be intolerable to Carly in the short term. She will process it as betrayal twice over. First, that Brennan made the approach, second, that Jason affirmed Jocelyn's right to decide and then chose not to tell Carly that she had. But the longer the dust settles, the more unavoidable the question will become: where does a mother's right to know end and a grown daughter's right to choose begin? That line is not straight. It bends with love, with fear, with history. And yet it exists. Britt, of all people, is the one to drag it into daylight. Jason's crossroads. A future that doesn't look like the past. After the reveal, Jason will have to walk a path with no precedent in his playbook. He cannot unknow what Britt said or unhear the sound it made inside Carly. He cannot retreat into the old arrangement where a single apology resets the system. To claim any shot at love that isn't a reenactment of prior bargains, he will need to say out loud what his choices have already declared. That protecting Jocelyn sometimes means not confiding in Carly. That respecting Jocelyn sometimes means standing with Britt when she refuses to be shamed for speaking plainly. That loving Carly does not obligate him to live under her jurisdiction. none of that erases his bond with Carly. It reframes it. And in the reframing, the spark he shares with Britt stops being an indulgence and starts looking like a way forward. Britt may not need to be first at every hour of every day, she needs to be chosen in daylight, not just defended in the shadows. If Jason can do that, if he can allow a future that is not a copy of his past, they might salvage something brighter than stolen moments and whispered promises. If he can't, then Britt is too self-aware to keep setting herself on fire to keep old myths warm. Carly's countermove, control or courage. Carly's next chapter will be defined by what she does with the pain. She can convert it into control, tightening her grip, demanding new terms, insisting that proximity equate to primacy, or she can do something harder. Let Jocelyn's choice stand without turning the room upside down to reclaim authority. Courage, in this case, would mean admitting that secrecy was not an act of disrespect but a perimeter drawn around a mission that could not afford to leak. It would mean recognizing that Britt's disclosure, however provocative, forced a reckoning Carly would have postponed until the damage was irreversible. Carly is no stranger to reinvention. If she chooses the braver route, her relationship with Jason may evolve into something healthier than the reflexive codependence that once protected them both and now threatens to suffocate them. If she chooses control, she will make herself the story again, and the story will end where so many of Carly's crusades end: scorched earth and a victory that doesn't feel like winning. The town watches, the fuse burns. Port Charles does not keep secrets, it metabolizes them. The Brennan factor will linger, the WSB will draw its own invisible lines, and the rumor of who knew what when will outrun the facts. But the core drama is private and human. A woman who won't accept being an accessory, a mother who won't accept being excluded, a man who can no longer pretend that silence is a neutral choice. Somewhere in that triangle is the chance for something rare on a canvas that feeds on catastrophe, growth. Does Britt expose the truth to wound Carly? No, she exposes it to stop pretending that protecting Carly's feelings is the same as protecting Jocelyn's life. Does Carly bristle because she is petty? No, she bristles because motherhood makes even reasonable secrets feel like treason. Does Jason keep compartments because he is duplicitous? No, because it's how he survives and how he keeps others alive. The tragedy is not that they are wrong, it's that their virtues collide at the speed of a secret. And that is why this story sings. Not because of the badge in Jocelyn's pocket or the cold acronym stamped across it, but because of what the badge reveals: who these people are when their certainties are tested. Whether Britt and Jason find the courage to claim a life in daylight, whether Carly chooses trust over jurisdiction, whether Jocelyn keeps her agency without losing her anchor, those are the questions that will pull viewers to the screen and keep them there, breath held, waiting for the door between rooms to open just enough to see what comes next.